welcome to another vintage day. I want to share with you a very special cookbook that's in my repertoire of books. This is called The Household Discoveries and Mrs. Curtis's Cookbook. What's really special about this is that it belonged to the grandmother that I never knew. She died in the early 1930s when my dad was about 12 years old, so I really don't know anything about her. She's just a mystery. But this book actually gives me a little window into what she might have been like. There's little notations, little check marks by different recipes, and even handwritten recipes by her in the book. This one happens to be for a mahogany cake. Don't have many pictures of her, matter of fact about two. Her wedding picture and then this one, which looks to be about 1910 if you look at the outfit that she's wearing. She was a French Canadian. She married my grandfather in North Dakota, and that's where they made their life. There are so many wonderful recipes in this book. I've tried a few out on my family and they just love them. And one we're going to take a look at today is a gingerbread cake. And I'm also going to show you little excerpts from the cookbook and the household discoveries, just kind of a little idea of the things that they covered in this full volume. Here's how to make your life and be a good housewife. So let's go have some fun. The Household Discoveries book was first published in 1908, and Mrs. Curtis's cookbook was added in 1909. The book was not available in bookstores. You had to order it directly from the publisher, the Success Company, or get it from one of their representatives. The Success Company was confident that this book could change lives. They professed to keep the price low so that every family could purchase a copy. They expected to distribute at least 1 million copies throughout the continent of North America. They are quoted as saying, "The total savings to the public due to the use of the recipes and processes doubtlessly run far into the millions." They would pay people 1 cent a word for new household discoveries, including recipes. The book covers a wide variety of information for the care of the person and home. It is a highly informative read that will give you an insight to the daily life in the early 1900s. There is far too much to talk about in this book as it covers everything from home decor, heating, home sanitation, communicable diseases, infant care, gardening, one's bath and toiletries. The list goes on and on. There are even instructions on how to build an outhouse. So we're going to jump to the Mrs. Curtis's cookbook section. This is where we find the recipe for the ginger cake that I'll be showing you through this video today. It was written by Isabel Gordon Curtis, who was born in Huntly, Aberdeenshire, Scotland in 1863. As I prepare the gingerbread cake, we will learn more about Isabel Curtis in this video. After her schooling, her mother sent her to a caterer's kitchen to learn cookery, and she learned how to make common Scottish foods, shortbread, hot mutton pies, gingerbread, and bath buns, but not yeast bread. Yeast bread was traditionally purchased at bakeries in Scotland because Scottish home ovens were not designed to reach a high enough temperature to bake yeast doughs. She had a cousin visiting from Canada, and she told her about yeast breads and how to make them. So one day when her family was gone, she attempted to make yeast breads. Unfortunately, she didn't pick up on the fact that the bread actually had to raise before you put it in the oven to bake. So when they came out, they were heavy and dark, and they looked like curling stones more than anything else. She didn't know where to put them. She didn't want anybody to know of her failure. She thought if she buried them in the garden, they might be dug up. So she hid them in the attic of an old wash house. Years after, when she had utterly forgotten about them, the wash house was demolished by a windstorm, and among the debris there were the loaves. They were much curiosity for the neighbors. She never told her secret. One old man declared that they were meteorites, and his theory was looked upon as a possibility. I don't know about anybody else, but I know I have a few kitchen disasters that I would rather not remember. Curtis arrived in America in 1886. During her career, she worked for a newspaper and for the New England Homestead, Farm and Home, and Springfield Homestead Publications. In 1900, she joined the editorial staff of Good Housekeeping magazine. She was the one answering readers' homemaking questions. She left that position in 1903 to do similar work for Collier's Weekly, The Delineator, and finally, from 1907 to 1911, at Success Magazine, the publisher of Household Discoveries. Curtis published several books on homemaking and cooking. In 1909, she published her own cookbook, Mrs. Curtis's Cookbook, and it was bound together with Household Discoveries. At a crucial point in her life, a good friend instilled in her a belief that there is no higher accomplishment than to know how to live well, yet economically, making a home healthful, attractive, and happy. Her recipes are proof of that in this book. She died in 1915 at the age of 51. This recipe calls for molasses. There are two types of molasses. There's blackstrap and regular. We used both of them when I was growing up, and my dad just loved blackstrap molasses. But over time, blackstrap just kind of disappeared from the stores. But I was recently in the store, and there it was, blackstrap molasses, so I just had to buy a jar. I went right home and did a taste test. And then I remembered why I didn't like it. Unlike the regular sweet molasses, it is bitter and salty. Ugh. If you want your recipes to be light and fluffy, I recommend using the regular molasses, or you may want to mix them. But if you use the blackstrap, you may have to make adjustments with the salt in your recipe. I chose not to frost the cake with a chocolate glaze as recommended in the original recipe. I prefer to use a good heavy cream or whipped cream, and I'm sure that comes from my past living on a farm with cattle, and there was plenty of dairy products to go around. Even on its own, this cake is extraordinarily moist and the sweetness is perfection. I hope you get a chance to give it a try. As I go through the cookbook and I see my grandmother's notations and check marks, I begin to wonder why she made a particular recipe. Was it for something special? Like the cake we made today, could it have been my dad's birthday and perhaps she added the chocolate glaze? You know, I started a habit a few years ago when I lived in France. When I would try a new recipe, I would put the date on it, any adjustments I felt it needed, and where I was at the time I tried it. And now 20 some years later, I go back through my cookbooks and I see these little notations, and it brings back such fond memories. I highly encourage you to take those few moments to do it, because it's a gift that you will give your family that will just echo through time. Please join me again as I discover treasures and stories from the past while living another vintage day, a place where we can experience a vintage lifestyle together.